بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. All praises are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace, blessings and salutations upon Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with his family members, with his companions, ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een, and all those who follow in their footsteps till the end of time. May Allah make us from amongst them. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Today is the 24th of February 2024, corresponding with the 15th of Sha'ban 1445, and Alhamdulillah, we have an opportunity to discuss a very important topic, the topic of inheritance. Inheritance is known as ilmul fara'id or ilmul mirath, and the literal meaning of fard means to stipulate, to fix, to determine. In this subject, the heirs of the deceased as well as their proportionate shares are stipulated, are determined. There are many virtues of this ilmul fara'id or ilmul mirath in the sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we'll look at a few of the hadith. In one hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ta'allamul fara'ida wa 'allimuhu an-nas." Acquire the knowledge of fara'id, here referring to inheritance, and teach it to the people. فَإِنَّهُ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ, as it constitutes half of knowledge. وَهُوَ يُنْسَى, and this ilm, this knowledge will be forgotten. وَهُوَ أَوَّلُ شَيْءٍ يُنْتَزَعُ مِنْ أُمَّتِي, and it will be the first part of Islamic knowledge that will be uplifted. In another hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ said, تَعَلَّمُوا الْفَرَائِدِ, acquire the knowledge of inheritance. وَعَلِّمُوهَا النَّاسِ, teach it to others. أَوْشَكَ أَن يَأْتِيَ عَلَى النَّاسِ زَمَانٌ, very soon a time will come when there will be يَخْتَصِمُ رَجُلَانِ, two men shall dispute about a matter of inheritance. فَلَا يَجِدَانِ مَن يَفْصِلُ بَيْنَهُمَا, but will not find anyone to solve their dispute. Umar radiallahu anhu would say that learn the knowledge of inheritance like how you learn the Quran. This is the importance that Sahaba attached to ilmul mirath. There are many other verses or sayings of the Prophet ﷺ that highlight the importance of this topic. It's also important for us to note that in the Quran, in Surah Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has dedicated an entire portion of this towards inheritance and the rules and laws of inheritance. And it has been discussed in quite detail. So the shares of the heirs, this has been stipulated in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are over 30 verses of Quran and ahadith, sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this subject, but we've just looked at one or two. We can further do some research and read about this topic. When a person passes away, in fact, this topic is a reminder that we should all be preparing for death. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, every soul shall taste death. And an intelligent person is one who prepares for death before its coming. And this is one of the ways of preparing for death, is to have our matters sorted out. Our money matters should all be in order. It should be documented. It should be written down. And the starting point is the will. People should know of any debts, money that we owe or money that is owed to us. So it's very important for us to have this documented and recorded. Now, in terms of the heirs, this has been stipulated. We cannot say how much who will receive. When a person is living, that's a different matter. If they gift or hand over something to someone, but it needs to be with full possession. Cannot be with conditions attached. And once we gift it to them, then this will come out of our possession, out of our ownership, and passed on to the next person. When a person passes away, then the first thing from the deceased estate will be the burial expenses. So the kafan, the dafan, the shroud, the burial, the expenses for this will be taken out from the estate. Second is that any debts that the deceased had will then be settled. Whatever money a person has remaining, this will be used to settle the debts. After that, the amount that the balance, if there is any, then this will then, it will be seen in a person's will that had he made any wasiyat, bequest. So a bequest can be made to a non-heir for a maximum of 1/3. So maybe he wanted to give an organization, a masjid, or whoever it may be, but a maximum of 1/3 will then be taken out if there was any wasiyat that was done, and will be given, and the rest of the money will be for the shares of the heirs. In the case where there was no wasiyat, then whatever was remaining will then be distributed and divided amongst the heirs. So to summarize this again, firstly will be the burial expenses, secondly the debts outstanding, and thirdly will be the wasiyat, a maximum of 1/3, and fourthly whatever remains would then be distributed, meaning the shares of the heirs. Brother Muhammad Paracha will discuss the importance, the objective and the content of the wills, and thereafter we will have some of the legal experts speaking from on the legal side, with the Islamic rulings, for us to get a better understanding of this subject. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it productive for one and all. Jazakallah khair.
The next speaker, inshallah, is also a very important member of our community. His name is Muhammad Paracha. He's probably one of the world's best experts on Islamic finance globally, one of the forerunners in the industry. He's currently the managing partner for Norton Rose Middle East, which is a multinational law firm based in the UAE. He also heads up the global Islamic finance practice. And alhamdulillah, more than that, Muhammad is a student at our center. He studied Arabic for the last 9 years at the center and various other Islamic courses. He's a friend of ours, a colleague, someone we're very proud of. So alhamdulillah, Muhammad's topic today will be on the importance and the content of wills with some technical aspects that he'll introduce, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and respected elders. So today, as Mullah Saab has mentioned, I'm going to be talking on the importance of wills, the objectives of having a will, and we'll talk a little bit about the content of wills as well. Some of these things Mullah Saab has already sort of touched on, so we won't spend too much time. As Mullah Saab mentioned, this is one of those aspects of knowledge that is something that we need to spend a bit more time on. As Muslims, we have to recognize that, the root of, our deen and our word Muslim, in fact, is from aslama, meaning to submit. And meaning to submit means giving up all other ways. And so a requirement when we submit to Allah's will is to understand what those requirements are that He has for us. And that's really one of the central aspects of this topic, but also how Allah wants us to live every aspect of our life as well. As a side note to this topic of inheritance and financial matters, which Mullah Imraan touched on previously, what I found and find fascinating about the ilm of mirath, the ilm of inheritance, is that when you look at the Quran and you ask yourself about, what the Quran has mentioned in terms of the number of rakat for salah, which we know that is not set out in the Quran, but yet we see in the Quran, we see stipulated shares for inheritance. We see in the Quran, in the longest verse of the Quran, Surah Baqarah, verse 282, which is the verse that I look at in my profession on writing down debts. These are all financial matters that Allah has stipulated in the Quran. And I think that's quite an interesting side note, because when it comes to financial matters, we all know from the world that we live in that this is where the arguments and the quarrels with family members and others typically come from. And of course, Islam is trying to be a realistic religion, hence why we defer to Allah's will and knowledge on all of these matters. So again, we will not talk too much on these points, but our respected teachers, they essentially tell us that, when we are following Allah's deen, we see from time and time again in the Quran and in the hadith that, this is something that Allah wants from us. And, even in the Quran, we learn in our tafsir class that, sometimes the word shakirun is used. But this word doesn't mean sometimes when we apply it to Allah that Allah is grateful, but it means that Allah is appreciative of our actions. And I think when it comes to putting together our will and understanding this type of knowledge, this seemed to be very befitting to me, because, when we do all of these things, we are being told very clearly in the hadith that this is what puts us on the right path of sunnah, and that person dies with taqwa and is as a witness, and his deeds are forgiven. Just finally, and we won't say too much because this has been mentioned in the introduction, the importance of this topic of knowledge has been equated to half nisful ilm, which we heard a moment ago. So if we just ponder on all the knowledge that we have and the fact that inheritance has been described in that way, that gives us an emphasis on why we need to really focus a little bit on this subject. Maybe with regard to the fact that this will be one of the first things to be lifted, maybe we need to ponder on it a little more than we have been in our lives to date. So the objective of a will, I'm not going to talk about each one of these, but first and foremost is the fulfillment of the command of Allah, the duty imposed by Sharia in relation to our wasiyah. The second point, as was mentioned by one of the brothers, is if we want to deal with the optional share of 1/3 or the optional part of our estate through a wasiyah, then this is one of the ways in which we can deal with that as well. Otherwise, the shares are fixed by the Quran. Key, I think, is the first one on this slide, which is to avoid disputes between family members. And again, Mullah Sahib gave the example of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, something hasn't been done. Some of the relatives feel that their rights are stuck with maybe an elder brother who hasn't sorted it out, whatever the situation. But the key behind this, I think, as well as the other financial ayah that I mentioned, is all around avoiding disputes and disagreements. And we all know the harm that comes from this. Whilst I'm not a wills lawyer, others in the room will talk about this. In some countries, maybe where we are from originally, there is a benefit in us having a will. Otherwise, we might default into that country's legal system when it comes to how we die. And that legal system may not be in accordance with our own principles. So it's important to think on this. And I think the final point, just from all of this list, is the reflection on death. And as has been mentioned, when we prepare the will and when we think about these matters in our lifetimes, this is really the mark of intelligence. It's that person that not only is looking at his a'mal, but is thinking about the future, thinking about the advice that he's going to be giving to his deceased children, his relatives, the nasiha, as well as making sure that he's following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in my final section, before I hand over back to Brother Muhammad, we've got too many Muhammads in the room today. I think there's 4 of us. We're just going to talk very quickly about what's inside a will. And as I mentioned, there are brothers in the room who practice this day in, day out, and they'll be elaborating on this. But essentially, look at this as a contents page of what we should be thinking about. And, you know, I think Maariya will be talking about this in much more detail. But you'll see from the content that it's about making sure that we give time before we pass away into all of these matters that should be dealt with in our lifetime, so that when we pass away, there is no ambiguity, there's no chaotic scenes in our family who are dealing with grief. It's all stipulated, it's all set out, and there's no confusion and there's no arguments. And of course, in the world that we live in, some of us may live in the UAE, we may have assets here, but we may be from the UK or we may be from South Africa. That's what we call as a cross-border situation. And that adds another layer of complexity onto the whole thing. And if we're from a jurisdiction that has tax, or we own assets in countries where there's tax, how is our tax planning going to deal with these cross-border situations, as well as the issues of fiqh? So it can be a complicated matter, and one that requires some careful thought rather than just some afterthought. We'll very quickly skip over some of this because Mullah Sahib has talked about this, and I want to talk about the 1/3 wasiyah. But as has been mentioned, kafan dafan, the expenses of the death, as has been given in the answer, it is perfectly permissible for relatives to pay this if they want to. This is not a problem. But when it comes to the second item that Mullah Sahib mentioned, there are actually 2 types of debts, dayun. The first kind is the kind that Mullah Sahib has mentioned, which is that you owe someone money. So if someone has taken a loan and that person passes away, then that's a monetary sum, that's a qard that has to be paid back. But we also have to ask ourselves, in this complicated world that we live in, what other types of financings do we have? And maybe we have taken financing for our house. If that's from an Islamic bank, maybe the bank owns the property under something known as an ijara mortgage. And so how does that work in the context of our death? We have to understand all of these different ways in which we get financing, which may mean that they're not a debt. It may mean that they're dealt with in a different way. So those are all very important things, but 100% of that kind of debt needs to be paid from the estate before anything else. But as I mentioned, the second kind of debt, which is one that we often neglect, is what is our debt that is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's something that we also need to ponder on. So whereas 100% of the 4 schools of thought say that a debt that you owe to someone has to be paid back to that someone as a priority from the estate after burial expenses, 3 of the schools of thought, when it comes to the debts that we owe to Allah, say that 100% has to be paid of that debt. So things like zakat, fidya, if we've missed fasting, you have to do calculations for that. How much salah have we missed? There has to be calculations for that. That should ideally come out as that debt that we owe to Allah. And according to Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, and Imam Ibn Hanbal, may Allah be pleased with the 3 of them, all of that has to be calculated, and 100% of that has to also come out as part of the debt calculation before you get to the distribution and the execution of the will. According to Imam Abu Hanifa, it can only be given from the 3rd. And this is why I'm mentioning it as the introduction to the 3rd from the wasiyah, which is that optional part of the estate that comes after you've dealt with the expenses and the debts. But he also stipulates that it can only be given if it was contemplated in the will. So it has to be in writing, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayhi, and that's why it's important that we talk about it today. Once those 2 matters have been dealt with, we then put the will into effect, and as I mentioned, others will talk about that and distribution rather than me. The next slide that I have to talk about was the bequest of 1/3. So just very simply, in a diagrammatic format, you have a third, which is effectively that optional aspect which can be given to the heirs as the wasiya. And from that, as we just learned from Imam Abu Hanifa, from the fiqh of the Hanafi school of thought, from that you also will pay things like zakat, fidya, and those other items which would need to be calculated. That would leave the 2/3, which is the amount then that we're talking about after all of these burial costs and expenses and debts have been dealt with. So from that 1/3, I think one of the points that I think came out to me was we often think about charity in this life and how we're going to spend our money on different causes that come to us. I think one of the things that comes out from reading the books on wasiya and this 1/3 is we should be thinking, I think, more about planning for our soul's journey in the akhirah. So one of that would be, of course, thinking about zakat, thinking about fidya, thinking about ibadat that we have not completed, and giving instructions for that calculation to be made, which is typically the amount that is paid at each salah for zakat and fitr, for each of those missed salahs. We should give that instruction because it will assist our soul's journey in the hereafter. But it also, I think, gives us the ability to think about things like sadaqah jariyah, and thinking about sadaqah and what the maximum impact of that sadaqah jariyah could be, and how we could perhaps invest in impactful things that might have a continuous sadaqah jariyah after our demise. So things like the training of the hufaz, wells, these kinds of things could be also mentioned in that 1/3. The one thing, just ending on the wasiya, is that from that, it's very clear from the hadith that the heirs cannot benefit from the 1/3. So in one of the hadith, and I'll read it because we have the problem with the slides, I heard the Messenger of Allah ﷺ saying, Allah has appointed for everyone who has a right what is due to him, and no bequests, meaning no wasiya, can be made to an heir. This is in Abu Dawud. And secondly, Allah has given each person a share of the inheritance, and it is not permissible to give bequests to an heir. This is in the Saic. So it's very clear that that 1/3 is not for the heirs; it's for a different category of people that are not being given the fixed shares. In the last section, which I was only going to be talking about very briefly, it was to effectively give you a bit of a flavor for what those stipulated shares in the Quran are, how much do certain people get. But coming back to what Mullah Sahib said, in terms of working out that amount, it's always better to go to a mufti, Mullah Imraan Sahib, and write everything down on a piece of paper, and to get the precise calculation for the circumstances that the family sees it in. So that brings me to the end of my session. And I think back to the MC.
The next speaker, inshallah, is a brother by the name of Muhammad Maariya. He's quite well known in our community. He has 17 years experience as the managing partner of a company called Just Worlds, which is a local consultancy which assists mainly expats in crafting wills and also on the management of deceased estates. Mohammed previously worked for Just Worlds in the UK before starting off and establishing Just Worlds in the UAE as well. He also has experience in financial services and real estate too. In terms of Mohammed's topic, so I mean, all of this that we've covered thus far has been theoretical. We'll try and give it a more practical twist now, specifically focusing on what happens if a person passes away without a will, the impacts of what's called intestate succession, talking about things and practical aspects like powers of attorney, as well as practical guidelines that we should keep in mind when preparing a will. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that will arise out of this, especially in terms of what the effects are if a person passes away in the UAE, and what the options are for expats specifically when preparing wills in this jurisdiction, depending on where their home country is. So, Muhammad, if you're ready, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can everyone hear me? You know, they say, I'm sorry, I know it's a very morbid subject. You know, if you don't mind me saying, why people don't want to talk about the subject, because it will create animosity within the family. People start fighting. This is in some cultures considered as a taboo. I deal with Muslims and non-Muslims, and I can tell you one thing, nobody wants to talk about this topic. We all know deep down we got to go, but sorry to say, nobody likes to plan for this. You know, they say, Shaykh, the dead cannot speak. I think we can agree to this, but I beg to differ. The will is speaking. This document is speaking on behalf of the deceased. And when it comes to money, Muslims become non-Muslims, non-Muslims become Muslims. They're always looking out for number one. When these complicated cases come to me all the time, I have to sit down and I feel like I'm judge, what's the saying? Judge, execution, jury, and the executioner as well. And I'm in the room with the family fighting. You find out there's a second wife. There is a child that the parents haven't been speaking to. And before you know it, you're waking up the devil in the person. And when it comes to money, people then look at the laws of the country. They don't look at Sharia. They look at the laws. They want to see which law will benefit them more. That's why Muslims become non-Muslims, non-Muslims become Muslims. Very recently, they've passed the expat law in the UAE, which means if a Muslim passes away, the estate is divided 50-50 between the spouse and the children. Forget the will. 50-50. Is this in line with Sharia? No, it's not. Even though it's 50-50, the family will still fight. Because one of the children will say, wait a minute, according to Sharia, I'm getting 2 shares. Why is the mother taking 50%? This is the importance of the will. And local law is applied to the distribution of the estate. But you know, there's one issue with the courts here, even if they're applying Sharia, is who controls the children's shares. So you imagine, according to Islamic law, if the husband passed away, his estate is divided into 100 shares. Now they'll club together the bank account, the car, the gratuity and the service benefits, the property, everything's clubbed into 100 shares. The parents of the deceased will take 16.66% each. The wife takes 12.5%, balance 2 shares to the son, 1 share to the daughter. That's the Sharia. But when it comes to the children, this can be, the control can be given to the grandfather. You might be thinking, what's wrong with that? I give you a case. The grandfather was in a coma in the home country. And I told the court that the grandfather cannot even make decisions for himself, let alone for the children. And the judge told me, even if the grandfather, and he did this, has one last breath in his body, not only is he legal heir of the 1/6, but he's controlled the children's share. We had to wait for the father to die. Sorry, it's not a nice word. After 6 months, because his situation was terminal, then we can start controlling the estate. So even you're applying Sharia, you need to understand the control aspect is a very complicated matter. Secondly, if you have a business, how are you going to work out 100 shares? Your business is making money. You are filing in your accounts. We all know the accounts is not 100%. It's never 100%. How do you divide 2-to-1 shares? How do you divide 12.5 shares? It's not easy. This is why, when it comes to a will, it's not only what the shares are. Anyone come to me and say, this is my family, I can tell you the shares. But when it comes to the control of the money, this is problem number one, because each judge in the court has a different school of thought. Some judges will give it to the grandfather, some judges will give it to the wife, even the father's brother, who doesn't even live in the UAE. he is now given the control of the estate. So it's not only the shares, it's the control. For me, that is equally important. So when somebody says the dead cannot speak, I beg to differ. The will is speaking. I think we can wait for 2 minutes for the azan. So local law is distributed to the estate. So when I said the expat law has been, there's a new law for expats. This is applied to everyone. Now Muslims can even register their will in the court, and they can register their will any way they like, not even according to Islamic law. Why would people do that? I'll soon come to that in a moment. What I'm just trying to get to is the law of the land will apply. Each judge have their own interpretation for the control of the children's money. Furthermore is guardianship, which I'll come to in the next slide. But if you don't have a will, the law of the land will apply. Now, if you're holding a British passport, any of your brothers are from the UK, the children's shares will be subject to tax. So if, according to the UK law, if the husband will everything to his wife, there's no inheritance tax. I'll say that again. The husband will everything to the wife, there's no inheritance tax. If you will it to your children, they pay 40% tax above a certain amount. The point I'm trying to get to, it's the control of the money which you put into the will. For me, the best will, the best type of will you can draft is the one you sit down with your family and tell them, this is what I'm doing. This is how the will is to be structured. Who's going to look after the business? Who will look after the guardianship of the children? Who's going to go to the court to open up the legal aid file? That is a big responsibility. So the best type of will is when you actually sit down with your family and tell them what is going on. The shares, I'm not refuting that. The shares are, as like I told you, 1/6 each to the grandparents, 12.5% to the wife, balance 2 shares to the son, 1 share to the daughter. Do you know many non-Muslims are so confused? They think the brother takes all the money. I said, no, you have a daughter, she takes 50%. I said, what? 50% my daughter's taken? I said, that's a share. And if you have 2 daughters, it's 2/3. When I tell them, they're surprised because they keep thinking the brother's coming. He's going to take all the money. There's a lot of miscommunication, misinformation in the market. All your end of service benefits is blocked. Now, many of you may not know this. End of service benefits has 2 elements. You have the gratuity, which is governed by the labor law. Then you have the life assurance, which is like we call it a fringe benefit. Not every company gives the life assurance. But if you fill in the beneficiary form for the life assurance, this will bypass your estate, which means it doesn't get caught up in the banks or the legal system. And if that money is going to the beneficiary directly, there's no tax to pay if you are coming from the West where there's inheritance tax. All your other assets, especially off-land properties, are frozen. So what you need to understand, the moment a person passes away and you surrender the Emirates ID card, which you have to do for the body to be repatriated, which goes against the Sharia, you should be buried here. But I'm dealing with death cases where people say, no, it's going back to a home country. This is wrong. The burial here is free of charge, by the way. So why people paying all this money to repatriate the body, I don't understand it. When it's free of charge, so you don't need to worry about people paying for it because the government is paying for this. But when you are dealing with a death case, the moment the authorities pick up on the fact that you've passed away, all the bank accounts are blocked. There's no joint accounts are not either or survivor. This is a misconception here. So once the banks are informed, they push the button, they block the full account. If you have 100 dirham in a joint account, the husband owns 50 dirham, the wife owns 50 dirham. But the bank is blocking the 100. When you go for the inheritance or to open up the legal heir file, the wife will get the 50 dirham back and 12.5 of the husband's share. So when people say women don't get anything, I beg to differ. So you got 100 dirhams, the wife keeps 50 and taking 1/8 out of your 50. So why do people say that she doesn't get enough? She's getting a lot, but you kept the account single, not joint. If it's single, then it's 12.5 of the full 100 dirham. If it's joint, 50 plus 12.5. The second thing is the visas are cancelled. But the point I'm trying to make is everything is blocked in the UAE. And even if you have an off-plan property, in order to get the NOC or trying to transfer the ownership, you need a court order for this. Family arguments, this, sorry to say, I don't need to tell you. Everyone is coming out the woodwork. You'd be surprised when I'm dealing with 2 wives, and the first wife doesn't even know the second wife exists. It's funny, it's a fact of life. And the poor husband, I'm trying to think from his point of view, why did he tell his first wife he got married again? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? He didn't want to start World War III at home. So, but she will come out. And according to Islamic law, that 12.5% is now split 2 ways. So each wife will take 1/16 each. Ex-partners. This is a bit of a grey area. When I say grey, if you're separated but not divorced, you're still married. Remember that. And believe me, you might have every intention of not giving, but according to Islamic law, she's still your wife. Assets in other countries will be distributed according to the local laws there. You know, if I can say something personally, the Quran is the only book on this planet, the only religion that gives inheritance laws. There's no book that will talk about inheritance. So if you're looking at laws of other countries, they're based on the civil law, which means the government has made the law, but it doesn't mean it's coming from the Holy Scripture. So if you look at the UK, you can make a will to the dog. You're thinking, why would someone give all the money to the dog? You know why? To teach the children and the wife a lesson that they prefer the dog more than their family. I don't agree with it because you can't do this according to Islamic law, but people are doing it. In Europe, the estate is 50-50 between the wife and children. Why? Because in Europe, they know that if the husband passes away, the wife is going to remarry. Or if the wife will pass away, definitely the husband remarrying within 2 to 3 months maximum, he will get married again. So why they split the estate 50-50 is only so that the inheritance is reaching the children. If you look at Islamic law, your mother and father who raised you, clothed you, fed you, sacrificed for you, they get a slice of the cake as well, 1/6. Now, if the parents say, we don't want the money going back to the spouse, the widow and the kids, that's up to him or up to them. But you cannot actually, like I gave you the example, someone in the UK making a will to the dog, you cannot deprive your legal heirs. That's why there's been cases where a happily married couple, happily married, husband meets a woman, she makes a fool out of him. Next thing you know, he's changing the will. Islamic law has stopped this. You can't do it unless you marry her. So they don't recognize these relationships. This is the power of the Islamic law of inheritance that both Muslims and non-Muslims don't understand. I mean, I can do a very long talk on these points, but just due to time constraints, I'm just trying to finish this off. But ex-partners, if not divorced, will stake a claim in your estate. Assets in your home country will be distributed according to the laws there. Take India as a good example, 1.5 billion people. You know, in India, if the husband passes away, his mother, his wife, and children are all legal heirs. Do you know who's left out the equation? The father. And many, I know, Hindu lawyers is writing to the government saying how dare you are taking the father out of the equation. Islamic law has already included the father. So even a country like India, the civil law, people are not happy with it. The children's control of the inheritance is always given to the wrong person. So remember, even if you have a will, you might say to me, well, I live in UAE. Why do I need a will? Islamic law is there. My family will go and say, I want Islamic law. They will offer it, or they will give the shares accordingly. But the court decides who's looking after the money. And for your information, that children's share could sit in the court until the children reaches 21. The age of maturity in this country is 21. If you ask me, it should be 25 or even 30. Because if you give a 21-year-old £100,000, dollars, rand, while in the middle of university, I think we all know what's going to happen. But in the UK, it's 18. Even in the UK, many people don't know this, they're trying to change the law to 16, which is ridiculous. For me, the age of maturity should be absolute minimum 25, but in the UAE is 21. So all the funds will sit in the court till the children reaches the age of maturity. That means for school fees and everything else, you have to put an application in the court, which costs money, time. The court will vet the whole thing, and then they make the payment to the third party. Business disputes are a very expensive process, yes. You pass away intestate, it's a very expensive process dealing with the courts. Please make a note. Every judge working in the court, they have a different school of thought. And even you try to make them understand what the situation is, they're not going to budge. Business disputes. Do you know company bank accounts are now blocked if you pass away in the UAE? Somebody asked me why. I said, because the family of the deceased is going to rely on the business partner to pay them the salary of the deceased husband. And the business partner saying, well, your husband's dead, I'm not paying your salary. So the family think, what are we going to do? They'll go to the bank, say, freeze the account. The business will fold. So business disputes is another issue here. And the tax rate or inheritance tax is applied. If any of you are from the UK, let me tell you one thing. When you complete in the probate forms in the UK, they will ask the executor, did the deceased own assets outside the UK? And you will have to tell the truth. If you don't, you'll get prosecuted. If you do, all those assets will be taken into consideration. Okay, if you have a registered will, please note, every country has a system. As you go to the UK, 2 witnesses will suffice. Here, register the will in the court properly. So what can you expect? Expedited distribution of your assets. The courts here, once they get the death certificate, by the way, if you pass away in a different country, the death certificate will have to be attested. UAE Embassy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Arabic translation, Ministry of Justice. It can take 2 months, minimum. But once you have the death certificate, you give it to the courts with the will. They will send the court orders within 4 to 6 weeks to the Land Department, RTA, and the banks. By the way, good luck trying to get the money from the banks here in the UAE, because they are sitting on hundreds of court orders, and you have to use Vasta to go in just to get your money, but that's a different matter altogether. Your wishes will be honored locally. So, irrespective of what you write, the court will honor your wishes. So like I said to you, in the UK, if you will everything husband to wife, vice versa, there's no inheritance tax. If you make a will in the UAE and will everything to each other, there's no tax. But when the wife receives her share, she should follow the Islamic law. She should give the shares right to the children, to the parents, whatever the shares equates to. But there's no tax to pay once she receives, and she can distribute as and when time allows. But doesn't mean you sit on the money for years. You need to distribute it quickly. Your estate and life policies, investments, the will covers everything. No family disputes. Everyone knows what they'll get. You can even insert an exclusion clause, but this is if you're divorced. Otherwise, believe me, even when someone's divorced, they'll still try to come back. You know, even going through a divorce, there's two parts. There's one where you get the divorce, and the second part is dealing with the guardianship of the children and the assets. Believe me, she'll be claiming before the second part takes place. It's a very cost-effective process. You have children from previous marriages, very important. When you have 2 shares and 1 share, that's to your children. Even if you are married again and divorced on the mother of the first child, they are still legal heirs. You can leave a gift of money up to a family member, as we said, up to 1/3. Nominate an executor is very important. That is the person going to the court, dealing with the execution. It doesn't have to be your spouse. It doesn't have to be your son or daughter. It could be anyone. It could be a professional. It could be the accountant. Could be a legal person. Could be a work colleague, your business partner. You can also leave a provision for charity. Power of attorney. Please bear in mind, if you're brain dead, incapacitated, or in a coma, a will cannot work. I'll say that again. If you're breathing oxygen out of a life support machine, and the doctors declared you 99% dead, you're only alive because a machine's giving you oxygen, you're still alive. A will cannot work. That's why you need a power of attorney. Now, power of attorney is a double-edged sword. So be careful who you're giving the power of attorney to. For me, having a will is part of the jigsaw puzzle. I know I'm a bit time constraints there, so I'll try to go through this very quickly. Having a will is part of the jigsaw puzzle. The biggest piece is the will itself. But have the power of attorney. Letter of wishes deals with funeral arrangements, organ donation. Do you know in the UK, if you pass away, the hospitals can take your organs out of the body? You wouldn't even know. There's a special form you need to complete. And even in the will, I put a clause, none of this. This shouldn't be happening. Beneficiary forms. If you're working, you've got an investment or online trading platform, get a beneficiary form from the third party, get it completed. Assets. Will is important, but making a list of assets is equally important. You know, the biggest challenge dealing with a legal heir claim, nobody knows where the money is. Husband don't even tell the wife where the money is. There's a lack of transparency, not here, in every country in the world. In the UK alone, there's 14 billion pounds sitting in the banks unclaimed. For your information, you may not know this, but after 5 years, that money goes to the Crown. In the UAE, if you don't claim the money in 10 years, it goes to the Awqaf. And I can guarantee no bank on this planet is going to come back to you and say, I'm sorry your husband or your father or your brother died. By the way, we've got $100,000 sitting here. Can you come claim the money? It's not going to happen. I can't get the stats for every country. So I can tell you there are, if not millions, billions, trillions sitting globally. Even in Switzerland, they've got money sitting there since the Second World War. And in Switzerland, they have to wait 99 years before that money goes to the government or whoever. So making a list of assets is very important. Funeral arrangements is important. Write this down if there's any funeral plans you have in your home country. Now, I know life insurance is a gray area. Let me say one thing, dying with a debt is haram. Agreed? Dying with a debt is haram. If you take out a mortgage here, the banks are giving you takaful-based life insurance because they don't want to repossess the property if the husband died. So I'm just saying, don't get into debt, but if you are getting into debt, take out life insurance, but you can take out term cover. There's no investment. There is some Islamic-based companies here, but I just recommend you have some form of protection because we're living in a society that when the husband is no more, they're going to block all the single and joint bank accounts. Your credit cards are blocked. And even to relocate back to your home country, you won't have money. And I don't know if you know, but going back to your own country, your credit rating is 0, which means you've got to pay for your rent 1 year in advance. And I'm not talking about the travel costs or your relocation and your furniture costs. I'm not even talking about that. Bank accounts. Have your bank accounts in A, B, C, D fashion. A is joint husband and wife. B, single for the husband. When I say B, be a different bank. C, single account for the wife. And D, bank accounts for the children. Because if the husband passes away, the joint account is blocked, C is blocked. B and D is not blocked. If the wife passes away, the joint account is blocked, B is blocked, C and D is not blocked. And if the husband and wife both pass away, Bank D can be operated by the guardian or the trustee, because courts will only release money for the children, provided there's an IBAN number. So it goes to the next point, bank accounts for kids. And that's it. I hope I've covered everything. Like Shaykh Imraan said, we can't cover this topic within one or 2 hours. This can take me 6 hours at least to tell everyone. But thank you very much. And I'll be here for any questions if anyone has anything they want to ask me.
Jazakallah khair, Muhammad. So, the next speaker, inshallah, is Brother Muhammad Ali. As Maulana mentioned at the beginning, he was actually the brainchild of this whole program. He approached Maulana and said that there was a real need to talk about inheritance, to educate the community about this particular topic. So Muhammad's been in the UAE for around 16 years. He has extensive experience in the legal field, worked for a number of multinational companies, working in the telecommunications space in the UAE as well, and has been an activist in the community for several decades, inshallah. So what Muhammad will speak about very briefly for the next 10 minutes is just a few personal experiences he's had in the field of inheritance and experiences that he can share and educate us about. And thereafter, for the last 20 minutes, from around 10 past 8 till 8:30, we leave the floor open to questions. So begin thinking of any questions anybody has that you want to pose to any of the members of the panel. And also, on the ladies' side, if there are any questions, my wife is there, so you can just give her the question and she will then WhatsApp it to me and we can pose it to the panel. So.
I'm going to, I've got no slides. So I'm just going to give you some personal experiences of what I experienced in the UAE in particular. I've also been practicing attorney in South Africa for about 20 odd years, 30 years in total. I dealt with family law, wills and estates, and commercial law has been my prime dealings. And I'm going to give you some real live examples that I've actually been through in the last couple of years. The first one I'm going to start off with is husband and wife, their marriage, alhamdulillah. Husband goes for a routine operation, nothing dramatic, nothing out of the ordinary, i.e. something like an appendix. And he passes away on the day. Relatively young, 28, 29 years old. Before he passed away, the brother had about 3 or 4 other brothers. And there was good, and there was relatively good muhabbat between the families, between the wife's family, the wife's and the husband's family. Sudden death, there was no will, and what then came out is our brothers alluded to the snake started coming out. It's the best way I can describe it. Where the wife was on her own in dealing with the burial, on her own in dealing with the debts, on her own in terms of trying to find ways of how to settle the rules and regulations of the UAE. Over and above that, it was dealing with the family, the husband's family in particular. They had about 5 or 6 properties in the UAE. She was staying in one. Alhamdulillah, they were all paid, free of that. They were all paid. But then the brothers wanted to now start taking whatever this deceased brother had. They wanted now to start to take this back into one big family pot. And they wanted to leave the lady out of the equation and send her back to wherever she came from, whichever family she came from. And Maulana, I think, was involved in this discussion in the initial stages. One thing that was missing was mashwara amongst the family. During these circumstances of what transpired, there was a lack of understanding about everything going into one pot in terms of Sharia, and then it's being distributed. So in terms of Sharia, the brothers have been right in terms of the distribution. But from a practical perspective, everything's got to be technically sold into a pot and put into a pot, and then it needs to be distributed. Or put it another way, one of the brothers needs to come up, stand up and say, I'm going to pay X for that house. I'm going to pay X for this car. And that money goes into the pot. And then it's distributed the way it needs to be distributed. Eventually what happened with this lady was, with Maulana's help and guidance, is the family came together, they applied the Sharia, and she kept her share of one apartment block. Oh, sorry, not apartment block, one flat in Dubai, and the brothers took the balance. The bigger question I dealt with afterward is, how do I live as the lady, as the wife? How does she survive? What does she live on? Because she stopped working. She had nothing really to stand on her feet to get employed into the UAE other than rental income. That's how they were living in the UAE, is rental income from the other properties. And that's how they subsidize their living going forward. Now she's sitting, okay, I've got a roof over my head, but how do I pay the bills? How do I continue living? How do I pass on anything towards my family in the foreign country that she came from? I'm not going to go through the dynamics that were settled, but just to give you some level of thought and understanding around some of the complexities. To go back to the aspect about the courts, apart from the judge or the magistrate, as we call him in South Africa, that's sitting there, the first one that you got to deal with is when you're transcribing your will from English into Arabic. The person that's sitting on the other side, that's writing it into Arabic, can put it in whatever language or phrases that she believes is right to what you have put down in English. That's one. So checking your Arabic will versus your English will against a learned colleague is priority right up there. Second point is spot on when it comes to the judge. My experience in this area of many, many judges in this region, they interpreted the world as they see it, as they read it. Why? You ask, because it should be fairly simple for them to understand. The answer, the most prominent answer I got from a judge has been, it's as if he is in front of Allah. And he is accountable for how he sees that distribution needs to take place. If the family have failed to take the necessary proactive steps, which is in the Quran, that's their problem, not my problem. Don't make your problem my problem. Don't put the monkey on my shoulder. He sees it as he sees it. He doesn't know that the grandfather is ill, other than someone putting some records in front of him, other than someone verbally saying something. He doesn't know. The only way he's going to say it's that is if he actually sees it with his own eyes that this person is ill. Other than that, it's left in Allah's hands. Second example I'm going to bring is Family came. They were here in Dubai for a short stint. Went up into a helicopter. Right, the husband went in the helicopter. Crashed. And he passed away in a helicopter crash. Which was just the wife, but more importantly, he had debts in the UAE. He had life policies that he took out while visiting. And he also had the life policies was given to his brother in the UAE that was stationed here. But also it came down to dealing with the banks. Dealing with the banks is you need to have wisdom times 100 dealing with the banks. Even though you've got a power of attorney, even though you've got the death certificate, even though you've got so many things written down against running in your favor, to get that money dispersed is a real challenge. What I kind of advise my once clients, I don't do this for money or anything, I just kind of help the community, is look at taking an offshore bank account. Cayman Islands, South Africa, any of those countries where you can plant your money rather than in this region. Because here it's just bureaucracy upon bureaucracy. In dealing with the courts, in dealing with the land department, getting the death certificate, even getting us buried here, it takes 3-4 days before we actually put into the ground. And that's been my own personal experience. And they just literally don't care. That's my personal view. The other, in coming to the helicopter crash, they had to deal with Civil Aviation Authority. We had to deal with the police. And you think it's Dubai, but then you've got to deal with Al Quwain, or you've got to deal with Ras Al Khaimah, or you've got to deal with Fujairah, each of its own little areas, and its own civil defense units, its own police structures, its own rules that you've got to deal with. Don't think of Dubai. Dubai rules do not necessarily apply to Al Quwain, do not necessarily apply to Fujairah. It all varies. Your visa, depending on the emirate it comes from, that's where you're going to get buried. So if you're staying in Dubai, but you have a RAC visa, you're going to go to Ras Al Khaimah. You're not going to be in Dubai anymore. Even if you're a tourist, depends on where your visa comes from, which emirate issued your visa. And you have to deal with the mortuary here, and then you have to deal with the mortuary there, and finding the proper area where it needs to be planted. The last example I want to bring to the table is a family, to make it more real as well, walking through their will and the structures of their will, is on the aspect of mashwara. In that mashwara is looking at your family, your children, involving them in that discussion so that they know. The second point is in terms of guardianship. You've got to look at the guardianship in this country as well as your homeland, just not your homeland. The executive of your estate is also something that you've got to look at as paramount importance, who your executive is going to be, because they're going to carry your Emirates ID card wherever it's going. Last but not least, whatever will you have, whatever will you want to put forward, is make sure that it's sitting with an accountant, your lawyer has a copy or holding the original, and the certified copy is sitting in your premises. So anyone or any third party that you trust has access to that particular will. Jazakumullah.
So I think we'll open up the floor now for questions. We've got about 20 minutes. I don't know if we'll fill up the full time, but if anybody has any questions now, inshallah, we've got all the panel of experts. I think when we come forward, inshallah, we can just affiliate on Zoom, and the ladies can hear as well. So.
My first question is, what if a person forgives your debts before or after you die?
Oh, sorry. I think, Shaykh, you can put the Islamic element.
So, yes, in terms of debts, right, this is something that there's a lot of emphasis has been placed on. In one hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, mentioning the rewards of a martyr, that all his sins are forgiven, illa they, except debt. So this is, which is regarded as hukukul ibad, the rights of the creation of Allah. So a lot of emphasis has been placed on this. Now, Abdul Karim is asking, what happens if a person forgives the debts? So meaning after the deceased passed away. If they forgive it, then obviously they'll get great reward for that. So it might be a scenario where the deceased person couldn't pay it back, and they've overlooked it. So that will be a form of sadaqah, and they will get great reward for it. That's something that is encouraged. If we're in a position where someone owes us money and they can't pay it for whatever reason, and if we forgive them, then that'll be they will be absorbed of that. Does that answer the question fully?
Yeah.
What is the second one?
Sorry, can I just add something?
Sure.
First of all, it's important, if anyone has debts or we're having a loan, get this written. This is very important because there's no point someone saying he owes me money, he's got no proof. So that is another matter. Now the courts here are allowing even the loan agreements to be registered so that there is a proper record. So I would say if you're giving money or someone is giving you money, it's very important. This is Surah Baqarah verse 280.
The longest verse.
The longest verse in Surah Baqarah. They
have
it written down. It's very, very important. And there is a letter wishes template the testator can draft and say, I forgive this loan. So at least there's a record that he's saying it, because there's no point you're saying he forgives the loan. How do we know? Did you see the person? Get it in writing. So there is a letter wishes template. You can say that you give money to someone, you put it in the letter that I forgive this person. And that letter, you got to give it to the executor of the will. So he knows that this is what you've agreed to. So there's some documentary evidence. It's very important when you go into a court or you're dealing with a family, there should be documentary evidence. So if there's a loan, get the loan agreement. If someone's forgiven the loan, write it down. And all of this should be documented with the list of assets given to the executor.
And also just to add to that, if there's any of the wills, I think most of the wills, it has a section for debtors and creditors. Like Muhammad said, have it mentioned, have it written down, that I owe so and so much. So it's there. And it's a very simple template. Even the general Islamic wills, it comes with the debtors and creditors column. So if we owing someone or someone is owing us money, this should be documented. Second question.
What if the person who has control of the money dies? So let's say I die, and then I give control to someone and they die.
Look, when you draft a will, you always have a plan B. You have the plan A, you appoint X. X is not there, Y comes. Y is not there, Z is there. So let's say while X is dealing after the death of the testator, Y can come in and then take over. But again, X, Y, and Z need to have a list of the assets, the documents. If you don't mind me saying, the biggest challenge, it's not me, I think everyone is having, and I'm sure brother can agree with me, so you're not writing anything down. So when you're dealing with a death case, you've got no paperwork. You don't even know which bank account the money is in. You don't know what debts or liabilities there are, who owes money, if you paid your rent, for how long you've paid. All of this, you need to document this so that whoever pick up the file tomorrow has a roadmap on what should be done. But like I said, this is a subject when people, like I talk to people, they don't want to even talk about this. So if you don't want to talk about it when you're alive, then who's going to know once you've passed away? And by the way, the letter wishes, I have a template.
If anyone needs one, contact me. I can give you the template for the better wishes.
Thank you. Last one is, what if your debts are so great that you cannot distribute the other part of your inheritance to your heirs?
Brother, if the debts are high, there's no inheritance. Everything gets deducted. That's it.
Okay.
But just for your reference, banks cannot go after the family. It's illegal. So let's say you owe the bank 150 dirham and you only have 100 dirham. It's illegal for the banks to go after you and say you got to pay. However, you should pay for the deceased's sake so that he has one less hurdle. Should Shaykh want to add anything? That's another question.
Isn't there an exception to that in a trust? So if you put your property in a state in a trust, then they, the banks can either come after that money
Yeah, you
or
talk about
property.
trust foundation, yes. That's a high profile
Is that
setup.
what the rich people do?
Yeah, that's a high profile setup. Even to protect the children, the inheritors, the legal heirs, they don't misuse the money.
Right.
Or they, children going for a divorce, the ex-spouse doesn't go for the parents' money. So you set up foundations and trusts.
Sorry, one thing. I don't even know what a will looks like. Is there like some sort of template or something? What a comprehensive will looks like?
Just contact me afterwards. I'll send you a template.
Thank you.
I have a question. Basically, I think if I correctly understood, you said that courts are very, weird here, especially in terms of interpretation of wills. So what is, recently I had a conversation with one of my friends. He happened to be a lawyer as well. And the first conversation, I called him, I need a will. He said, the guy is Muslim or non-Muslim? And I said, the Muslim said there is no benefit of will here. Straight away.
It's been a year ago, Abu Dhabi courts are now allowing Muslims to register wills.
Okay.
Before, it was a bit difficult. Before, you had other challenges, but now only Abu Dhabi courts. And for your reference, everything is in a civil court, not a Sharia court.
Okay.
So if a Muslim wants to marry a Hindu, according to Islamic law, you can't do it. But in Abu Dhabi, you can do it. Yes, everything's changed there.
So which means that if the will is registered in Abu Dhabi, that's a benefit. Dubai, there is no benefit.
Because this is the federal court, the United Arab Emirates, they control every court, but Dubai and DIFC is not registering wills for Muslims. You have to put your religion on the will. And even DIFC courts say if you change your religion after registering this will as a non-Muslim, it will be invalid.
Another question is linking to that one. The will, of course, let's say, we register a will in Abu Dhabi. That will be globally accepted as well.
Every country has a law.
Yeah.
If you look at Pakistan, you can't change the Sharia there.
Yeah.
Anything goes against Sharia, they will throw it out. If it's UK, you can do it. But remember, when it comes to assets, you have movable and immovable. Now, when it comes to immovable, it's better you make a will in that jurisdiction, like South Africa. But if you have movables, one can argue you can have a global will. But still, I recommend thank you, Bridget. Every country has their own system. So, but here in the UAE, through a local will, I've unblocked bank accounts in Singapore, Switzerland, and Jersey. So I can cover those banks as well from here.
Then comes the question, you should have a will for every country in the whole asset.
If you have it immovable, it's recommended. Movable, no. So you have an online trading platform, I can do it from here. But you remember I said complete the beneficiary form or nominee form? Get that completed if there's one available.
Any other questions?
Can everyone fit me in the will, please?
So there's a, okay, that's good.
The word that you mentioned is to be registered, just to understand this. It can only be done in Abu Dhabi.
Yes. Okay. It's via a video call. You don't have to go to Abu Dhabi. So they have made the changes now legally.
I see. And then you said the will is to be attested before it's.
No, it's a video call. You notarize a will. So you have a will, bilingual, half English, half Arabic. You sign it, upload it in the court portal. They will approve it. Then there'll be a video call. The call is recorded. They will go through the will, ask you the questions. You say yes, and they will notarize it and send you an e-copy.
Okay. Before, so something that was required was the will had to be tested. Tested to verify that.
You see, when it comes to the will, when you say attested or witnessed, notarized, these are separate words but having similar meaning. So if you take a will to the embassy, if you take a will to the South African consulate, I think in Bank Street, then you're witnessing the will. Sometimes you go to the Singaporean consulate, they call it attesting the will. When you go into the court, you're notarizing the document. So there's a difference. There's a difference, yes. That's okay.
Just additionally,
Sorry, but just ladies can't hear the questions this week.
just additionally, for example, you've done the will, let's suppose today, and in a couple of years' time, you buy another property. What you do in the whole process again?
Sorry, but the will covers everything you own at the time of death. So let's say you register a will in 2024 and you pass away in 2050. What you own in 2050 is covering A to Z. The only time you update the will is A, if you get divorced or married, because marriage and divorce usually tend to nullify a will. If you change in the executors, the guardians, or the beneficiaries. But the asset list, if you're not, for example, you just say, I'm leaving everything as per Sharia, whatever you own in 2050 is included. So you don't need to update the will. But if you get married or divorced, for example, you're single till you get married tomorrow, or you're married, you become single, you need to update the will then.
So you don't have to list the assets on the will? I
never recommend it, because we all know the list will change. But you make an inventory, you make a separate list. And I have a 45-page document I give to everyone. But that list, you complete it, share it, and update it with the family. If I'm going to the court is going to say, where's the list of assets? And that's why I was saying that because people don't share the information, this is why it's so difficult to locate the money. And the court is not going to go on a witch hunt, checking with every bank, has the deceased got an account here, has the deceased got an account there. That's why I told you, the money just going disappearing. Banks are getting richer and richer.
Okay, there's a question, one of the sisters are asking, can someone give away all their wealth before they die? So this, from a Sharia perspective, you know, when a person is living and you're the owner of that, you have the right to do whatever you want to do with that. If you want to keep it, you want to give it away. Obviously, at the time of death, if a person says, okay, I'm giving so much to so and so, then that it's not accepted. Or the fatal illness of a person, or the illness that led to a person's demise, if in that period he wanted to deprive one of the heirs and gave it to someone else, then that won't be recognized. Maximum 1/3 will be given, but not the full amount. But say in a healthy situation, someone is healthy, and this is also something that's recommended. You know, we have kids, and we've got assets, and we've got, give it to them while we are alive. They'll make more dua for you instead of, you know, going through the whole process. So many people have opted for this route just to make it easier. That give as much as you can while you are alive. Although it might be difficult. Actually, it's difficult for many. But on this, you know, I read an interesting article recently on a person by the name of Sulaiman Al-Raji from Saudi, I think the Al-Raji Bank. So, you know, he started off, it's actually a story from rags to riches, and he's one of the, I think, ranked as the 120th richest person in the world. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he said, I studied the history of wealth and that, you know, and I saw it caused a lot of friction and discord and disunity amongst families. So he decided, I want to give everything away. give everything, meaning to his kids, and he distributed and he gave them their full share in his lifetime. And he set up work foundation and whatever, to the extent that he only had, his basic needs. So this is also is very difficult to do, because you feel now I'm not going to have enough. Allahu A'lam. But this is something that's recommended while we are alive. We can, and while we are alive, we don't have to. We can give it as a gift, because while a person is alive, it's not regarded as inheritance. Then it will be regarded as a gift. So one may be given more than the other, depending on the need or circumstance. That's fine as well. Okay. Give the wealth whilst alive as gift, but in different proportion as per Sharia. Example, more to one child. So this is, the Prophet ﷺ said also, when dealing with our kids, we should be equal. But also we have to look at the circumstances. Easy scenario, you got daughter and son. Maybe the one is married or one is quite wealthy, and the other is struggling. So the one might need a car, the other might need a house. So it depends also on the circumstance, what is the need of the hour. Right? When a person is alive, give the gift accordingly, and that is fine.
Question from question from is someone asked, can we register will in the UAE? And also about the recent change in the commercial law in the UAE for opening up of businesses by children under the age of 21. So yes, you can, in the Dubai court, you can register a will. You draft a will, basically transcribe it into Arabic, you go in front of the registrar, the clerk of the court. They're not going to ask you any questions. Okay, they're going to take that piece of paper, they're going to put the stamp on it, and it's going to be into file onto the system. It costs about 3,450 dirhams to register the will. That's the court's fees. That's away from any other fees that are due to your consultant. But that option is available, but it's not really, as brother articulated, it's not really recommended, because that piece of paper gets lost in translation. And when I say lost, I mean when I'm not lost, it's going to be filed. Okay, it's going to be on the court's register. But the background of it is that you got a clerk of the court is just going to look at your piece of paper, take your piece of paper with the two witnesses, and it's going to be put into the system. Whereas the process that the brother articulated, the Abu Dhabi courts are really, they are, from my experience, they're well articulated in terms of the process. They're well versed in the digital space in terms of the person that comes before you. I call them a judge, sort of like a judge. You come in front of them, you put your paper, you buy Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and you relay what you want. They ask you a couple of questions. The two witnesses are there, and then that piece of paper is transcribed into English and Arabic. And TIFC, which is not for Muslims, but my experience has been quite a bit with TIFC. In Abu Dhabi, it's a really good process system to follow. And I really recommend it. Tomorrow. Sure.
The cost of Abu Dhabi is compared to the previous one which you mentioned. The cost is 1,500 and the court fees.
1,500. The other one, in terms of the commercial law, has been a recent change. It's about 4 or 5 months old, where the age is 21. Now, as an individual of 18, you can open up and transact and get a license from a free zone. So how this impacts in terms of the commercial law, how it impacts in terms of inheritance, there's no precedent as yet of how the courts are going to look at age of majority being 21.
21, only a 21-year-old can register there. So if they have
this is the precedent I'm talking about.
Problem, yeah.
We're not sure how this is going to work with the courts in terms of inheritance. Even in terms of handing over money for that individual, is running a business, but can he now take over control of the family's estate? It's an open question at this stage. And also here, South Africa, we've got centuries of precedents we can look at. Here, we do not necessarily have sets of precedents we can really rely upon to define every situation or problem that arises. So finding the right legal advisor, individual that can guide you to make the correct decision within your family circumstances is critically important. It's super important. And I would say that you take X amount of money, you invest it with an individual, wherever that individual may be, so that they can guide you correctly in terms of what we know today and how to plan for the future.
Okay. I think our time is up. If there's any other questions, we can maybe just look at it on an individual basis after Salah. But before we conclude the program, in fact, when planning for this, we never even realized it coincided with tonight, which is the 15th night of Sha'ban. So just a reminder, and this was mentioned yesterday in the Jummah khutbah as well. And I thought it was very well structured, because the theme of the khutbah was about forgiveness, overlooking and forgiving others. And sometimes there's some discord, some dispute. It might be a small argument, but if it's not settled, then shaitan latches onto that and it becomes, it gets worse. And the Prophet ﷺ said, even if there's any dispute, any disagreement, you're unhappy with someone, but resolve it within 3 days. Don't let 3 days pass. If that time period passes, then it's going to get even more difficult. No matter how difficult it might seem, but if it's not done then, it's not going to happen, or very difficult for it to happen later. And subhanAllah, on this, the 15th night of Sha'ban, there's many ahadith, but one of the hadith is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness is at a higher level. Allah's forgiveness is there all the time, but these are opportunities that Allah is giving us to, it's an opportunity on our doorstep. So someone even mentioned that, but why just before Ramadan? Because Ramadan there's so many opportunities of us being forgiven. Why just before Ramadan we got 15th of Sha'ban? So the beautiful analogy was given, sometimes you got a cloth that is it has a stubborn stain. So you have to do a pre-rinse. So there's so many opportunities, and this is one opportunity to get the forgiveness of Allah. But a very important point, Allah forgives many people on this night, and the forgiveness and the opportunity is there for taking. Illa li mushrikin aw li mushahin, except one who ascribes partners unto Allah. Alhamdulillah, we are all a Muslim and we believe in Allah, so we don't fall in this category. But the second category, mushahin, Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, who is a mushahin? So is that person who harbors enmity in his heart for others, who has a grudge. So it's a perfect opportunity as well, if you've got a grudge with anyone, to be the better person and take that first step and do it for the pleasure of Allah. I'm not doing it for anyone else, but oh Allah, this is only to get your pleasure. And I'm doing it, I want to forgive this person, no matter what he's done or what they've done to me, but to earn your forgiveness, to earn the forgiveness of Allah. So if we become forgiving towards others, then this sifat and attribute of Allah, forgiving, we will become recipients of this. So these are just 1 or 2 points to consider. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cleanse our heart from any enmity, any grudge, any hatred towards anyone. Keep clean hearts, and let us try and sleep on this. And even if it means, taking the phone, phoning someone or visiting them, whatever it is, but it's a perfect opportunity that we have. Allah give us all the tawfiq. Allah accept the efforts of all the brothers. We thank Brother Muhammad Maariya, Muhammad Paracha, Muhammad Bayat, Muhammad Ali, all the Muhammads. I'm the only odd one out. So, mashallah, the legal advice and that we hope the program benefited. This can, inshallah, can be one of many. It's just the starting point, and maybe we can do another one on after Ramadan sometime, inshallah, on the will. Specifically, maybe how the advice for how to Jazakallah khair. Also, brothers and sisters, just keep in mind, mashallah, Ramadan on our doorstep, we will be having a juz a day, like we've been doing for the last 2-3 years. So we can be part of this. The children also can be part of it. This is a daily program. Even in the weekend, inshallah, we will try to have some programs on various different themes of Ramadan, how we can improve our taqwa, the etiquettes and the masail related to fasting. So inshallah, we try and be part of these programs. Allah give us tawfiq. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله وإليك يرجع الأمر كله علانيته وسره. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. O Allah, most gracious, most merciful, most kind, most forgiving. O Allah, you accept our coming here, Ya Allah. O Allah, this program that was arranged was done only for your pleasure, Ya Allah. O Allah, you accept it, Ya Allah. O Allah, reward all those that have participated and contributed towards it, Ya Allah. O Allah, make it beneficial, Ya Allah, for the speakers and for the listeners, Ya Allah. O Allah, make us of those who sort out our money matters, Ya Allah. O Allah, make us follow your rulings, Ya Allah, the rulings of the Sharia, the rulings that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, let us implement it in our lives, Ya Allah, in all our matters, Ya Allah, in all our matters, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, make us of those who are obedient to you and your beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rabbi Kareem, oh Allah, we ask of you for guidance, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, guide us and make us a means of hidayat and guidance for others, Ya Allah. Rabbi Kareem, oh Allah, we thank you for the many bounties and blessings. Allah, one of them being that we are able to arrange a program. We are able to gather, Ya Allah, for your pleasure, Ya Allah. Rabbi Kareem, oh Allah, on this Mubarak and blessed night, oh Allah, we ask of you for forgiveness, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, from head to toe, we are covered, Ya Allah, with shortcomings, Ya Allah, with weaknesses, with faults, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, it's only your favor that you have concealed these weaknesses, Ya Allah. You have concealed these faults and shortcomings, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, the way you have concealed it in this world, oh Allah, conceal it on the day of Qiyamah, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, we ask of you to forgive us, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, forgive us, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, forgive our beloved parents. Oh Allah, forgive our wives and children. Oh Allah, forgive our brothers and sisters. Oh Allah, forgive our family members and friends. Oh Allah, forgive the entire ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Allah, help the Muslim ummah, Ya Allah, throughout the world. Ya Allah, wherever they may be, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, especially our Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine. Oh Allah, you help and assist them, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, those that don't have food, Ya Allah, provide them with food, Ya Allah. Those that don't have shelter, Ya Allah, grant them shelter, Ya Allah. Those who are sick, grant them shifa, Ya Allah. Those who are in difficulty, ease their difficulty, Ya Allah. Those who are weak, Ya Allah, grant them strength, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, you grant hidayat, Ya Allah. Grant guidance to the oppressors, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, if hidayat and guidance has not been decreed for them, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, then destroy them like how you destroyed Ad and Thamud, Ya Allah. Rabbi Kareem, oh Allah. Oh Allah, you help and you assist us, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, the month of Ramadan is on our doorstep, Ya Allah. Let us embrace it. Let us look forward to it, Ya Allah. Like how Sahaba looked forward to the month of Ramadan, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, grant us true taqwa, Ya Allah, that you have spoken about in the Quran, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, make us of the muttaqeen, Ya Allah. Make us of those who are beloved to you, Ya Allah. Make us of those who are close to you, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, accept this program of ours. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربنا رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.